All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Inside the Coach's Office. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, along with my co host, Brian Barnes. And Brian, another Michigan State game in the books. Kind of went down how we thought it was going to go. Michigan kind of controlled the game. Um, Honestly, not the most beautiful game to watch. Kind of a clunker, really, not the most entertaining game we've ever seen. But what were your kind of, initial thoughts watching that game last night?
Yeah, um, my initial thoughts during the game and after was like, man, this is one pretty bad football team, and then one team that's kind of mediocre on the offensive side of the ball, other than Justice Hayes. Like we talked about it, kind of a slugfest, I guess. It just felt kind of sloppy. It wasn't
Yeah,
really intriguing, exciting, right? But there are some football fans who love that type of stuff. I mean, defensively, you probably felt really good about it, but a lot of penalties, obviously, especially on the Michigan State side. It just didn't seem like it wasn't an enjoyable football game to watch. Like if you didn't have a rooting interest on either team, I don't think that was the game that you were, tuned into last night. So
I agree.
that was a that was a downer, right? I mean, that was
Yeah.
kind of a didn't feel like a true, like, it's obviously much better when those two teams are really good. But it hasn't been like that in a while. And like you said, I guess kind of what we expected.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't, yeah, definitely was not the most entertaining game in the world. I was more interested in what was going on Twitter.
Yeah.
Some interesting stuff going on with Barstool
Mm,
Sports and
mm.
Brandon Walker being at
You
the
mentioned.
Mississippi State Texas game. One of the funnier things I've seen in a while, if you guys haven't seen that or really know who Brandon Walker is, I encourage you to go look up Dave Portnoy and the stuff at Barstool Sports, the stuff that was going on there, because it was some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. So I was more interested in looking at that stuff than the game, because the game was honestly kind of boring. It was just not enthralling and it's just, we talked about it going in, and like it just, we miss Michigan being a
Mhm.
big game, because we've seen some pretty huge ones. And like we talked about, we were there for 2021, and that feels like the last time this game was felt like it had a lot of meaning to it, where both sides were kind of, going into it as good teams. And yeah, just not a great football game. And from a passing perspective, both teams combined for just barely over 200 yards. So that kind of has a lot to do with it too. So just a lot of incompletions and a lot of just kind of just clunky football. And then the penalties, man, for especially for Michigan State side. How many times did you have to hear, play with emotion, but don't play emotional? How many times is
Right.
that line said over and over again? But it really played itself out for Michigan State, man. I mean, constantly getting personal fouls and just, man, it just was not a clean football game.
No, you're right, too many times. And like, all right, Bryce Underwood is extremely talented, but again, he's still a freshman. Like, the dude was 8 for 17, 86 yards. And we've talked before ad nauseum about, oh, well, he's $10 million, he's got to be the dude. But okay, like, he's still a freshman. And so sloppy. Aiden Childs obviously didn't play great either. Had the turnover earlier in the game carrying the ball. Was 14 to 28 for 130. But what's weird was, like, you and I both agree, and you mentioned it already, that you never really felt like Michigan wasn't in control, but you never felt like they were pulling away either. It was weird.
Yeah.
It was right. It was just that weird feeling of gosh, one play here or there by Michigan State, and they could, like, be in the lead, or they could really make it a game. And I just didn't feel that. It was odd for sure, and it was unfortunate. It was one of those,
So
like, Michigan on offense still, like, I think their identity is still, like, running the football, right? Obviously, right? But
yeah,
I almost
yeah,
feel like they're still searching for more. Or Michigan State just, I said if they got blown out, Jonathan Smith would be done. Well, they didn't necessarily get blown out on the scoreboard, but again,
hey,
not
they
not a
covered the
good.
spread again. They covered
God.
the spread again.
They did, for those
Last
that
seconds.
yeah, that matters. Yeah, I just unfortunate, yeah, on both sides. But I think, all right, I'm going to say this: both fan bases deserve better right now, and I do
Yeah.
think, though, if you're Michigan, you obviously feel a little bit better with the way the program is headed compared to where Michigan State is headed.
Yeah, absolutely. From Bryce Underwood's perspective, we talked about he's still developing, still a very young kid, true freshman.
Mhm.
But you would have liked, as a Michigan fan, you would have liked to have seen a little bit more. especially after last week against Washington. It felt like things were starting to come together a bit for the offense, and not so much, at least from the passing game perspective. Still, rushing, Haynes had 152 yards, Jordan Marshall had 110 yards. So they have two rushers go over 100 yards. I mean, you can't be too upset about that, but you would like to see the passing game come along a little bit more, especially after what we saw against Washington. You would have liked to have seen that continue.
Yeah, you definitely would. And again, if he's being compared to Trevor Lawrence as a freshman and those, outstanding first year quarterbacks, like you would expect a little bit more by now. But maybe that is something like Michigan State's defense didn't play terrible. I guess as crazy as that sounds, giving up 31 points, they could have given Bryce Underwood some challenges there as well. But I'm with you, especially, we talked about Michigan's schedule going forward a little bit isn't really daunting. But if you're a Michigan fan, you're wanting them to play a little bit better than they did yesterday. But a win's a win.
So where do you see this going now? As we'll look at Michigan State, have you heard anything? Have you seen anything? I mean, I was expecting it to kind of be today if it was going to happen, Jonathan Smith being let go, but maybe because it was competitive, maybe he's going to get a little bit long. I don't know, but I gotta imagine the fan base is like, man, we're done. Like, let's move on.
Well, the buyouts are so big for college coaches right now. I don't know what his is. There could be some hesitation there. Who knows what conversations they're having behind closed doors about what they're going to do in the offseason with how much they're going to put in NIL or the transfer portal. Like you just don't know. You just feel like the guy belongs on the West Coast. Like that's the sense that I get. Like he just doesn't look really comfortable right now. It's going to be 2 years in a row where Michigan State is not in a bowl game. That's going to be a problem. Like in today's, college football scene, like that's just not acceptable. Their schedule going forward isn't like, I mean, on the surface, again, isn't all that terrible, but like they're not going to be favored at Minnesota. They're not going to be favored home against Penn State, even though they're going through their issues, obviously. They're not going to be favored at Iowa. And then they play Maryland at Ford Field on November 29th, which drives high school football, fans and coaches in the state of Michigan crazy because that's Thanksgiving weekend, and that's typically when the high schools want to play their state finals, and that got bumped that day. So theoretically, I'm not a betting man, Dan, but I don't see Michigan State winning another game. And if you are the brass, David Blatt, their athletic director, I'm with you. What are you waiting for? They've already lost 5 in a row. And like I just said, they're not going to be favored in their last 4. So you're talking about going into the offseason with a 9-game losing streak. Like what win, if they win any of those games, unless they go 4-0, what win are you going to look back and say, oh, that's it. We got to keep them. We're good.
That was the program.
That's the program
really
changing win. There's not. And you wonder, because again, the game's played by humans and kids, you wonder what's going through their mind. And nowadays, our dudes thinking about transferring. It's crazy now that coaches have to recruit their own kids again, that are already in your program. But that's the reality of the situation. Are they hearing whispers that coach is going to be gone, and they need to start thinking other places? And there's probably conversations happening between kids and coaches from other schools, or friends that play on other schools, right? So that's happening. So just a bad situation because I felt for it. I felt their win week 2 against Boston College in double overtime. I thought that was okay. Bill O'Brien. Remember, I think we talked about it. Respected coach Bill O'Brien. He's going to do good things at Boston College.
Would be a little bit better than.
And I think Boston College is one win this season. Goodness. So not good for Sparty in the least.
No. And now looking at Michigan's outlook, obviously we talked about it a lot last week after the Washington win, but it's another game to check off the schedule. We think that they got a great opportunity to run the table up until the Ohio State game, and obviously nothing has changed after how they performed last night. But what would you say, if they are going to run the table to get to Ohio State, what are some things that they need to correct and get better to have an opportunity not only to win these next 3 games, but to have an opportunity to compete and potentially beat Ohio State in that game.
Like you said, you'd like to be a little more. They would like to be a little more, two-dimensional and not just relying on the running game so much. Like Bryce Underwood has had a few games where he has played pretty well. So it's not like he's like struggling to the point where it needs to be benched or anything like that. But I think, I think I mentioned this before, the Maryland game, just because it's on the road, I like what Mike Loxley does. I mean, granted, Maryland is 4-3, but it's still developing that passing game even more. And if not the passing game, you mentioned it early on in the season when Bryce Underwood carries the ball, well, like he did yesterday. That's okay too, right? And there's a lot of ways to win football games, and so those two things really. Maybe he carries the ball even more, but find a way maybe to get a little bit more consistent, maybe a little bit more explosive in the passing game. That's been a problem so far.
Yeah, I mean, Marsh is starting to show himself as a potential downfield threat for Michigan as a freshman receiver. But the tight end situation is a little bit interesting because Marshall and Tonelli played in Washington or against Washington last week, and that's really where that passing game kind of looked the most dynamic. Those two guys really came out and performed. But you're wondering with Klein, he did not look great yesterday. And you're wondering if maybe he's going to start seeing some less playing time, even though as a senior, I believe he's a captain as well, but just really struggled. And you wonder if maybe that there might be a shakeup at the tight end position because those guys really played. Marshall and Tonelli really played really well last week. And I don't know. I personally would like to see those guys get a little bit more playing time.
And it could be a situation, like you're saying, we were just saying like they need to develop more in the passing game. Maybe that is a situation where you'll see more 11 and 12 personnel sets, right? Get those tight ends on the field and then maybe work the passing game that way. If they like those guys or like those matchups, and maybe that's something later on in the season, as we're getting to that point, they're going to want to develop anyway, right? If they're not getting those explosive plays on the outside with those receivers, you got to try something new potentially. And that's something they might look at. I could see that.
It's pretty clear where Michigan's going to have to improve after this season, whether it's in the transfer portal or recruiting some top end receivers. But they need to improve that wide receiver room immensely because it's clearly their biggest flaw, I think, on this team is they need some more playmakers and just be more explosive at the wide receiver position.
Well, and like you said, like they're really like they haven't had that need to other than the Oklahoma game. Where Oklahoma's defense was awesome. Michigan really hasn't had it. Maybe USC where they couldn't go
USC,
point for
where they
point.
got behind.
And you can't go. Yep, and you can't go point for point with the team, right? That'll be like that the USC offense is. I think we both agree probably the best offense they've seen all year. And so that situation where they've had to go point for point with the team, they're not able to do that, or they haven't shown the ability to do that just yet. And going back to it though, on their schedule now. I'm not sure if Maryland will be able to put up enough points against Michigan to make that a problem, but obviously Ohio State will have not saying they'll do it, right? But they'll have the ability and they have the talent to be explosive and make that a track meet. And that's, I mean, to Michigan's credit, they're 6-2, 7-2. 6-2 and haven't had to win a track meet yet. So I mean the way they're playing, they're winning games in different ways. And so but yeah, the final game of the year, that'll be a test.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting. Obviously, once we get to that game, we'll break that down pretty in depth once we get to that week.
Let me say that I mean, it's terrible that we do this, right? But like, are we looking past Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland as
well? I was just going to say that,
and I still that Maryland game. I can see that Maryland game. I can see that being the tough one, because again, that's the week before, and you're going on the road, and Michigan and Ohio State both have had those trap games before, and they've performed well in those games and won going into that final game, but. Again, it'll be another test for your freshman quarterback, that trap game, right? And how much they've developed. So, that's the game I have circled as the one that's possibly, gonna give him fits.
Yeah. I mean, and Northwestern's not gonna be easy.
No,
They
they lost a close one in Nebraska. And yeah, there's I agree. I agree. And really, to be honest,
that could
let's be honest. Michigan probably not that they're off. I mean, not that they're not talented. They probably don't have the luxury to look past anybody, right? I mean,
yeah,
we still
that's
feel they're
true. They're just not
talented and they're
dynamic.
good.
Yeah, they're not dynamic enough offensively.
It's just yeah, it's just not that typical Michigan team that you think is yeah, like leaps and bounds. Doesn't feel like they're leaps and bounds ahead of everybody. But
But they might have the best running game in the Big Ten though. Like with those two backs, I mean, and we saw it last night. Like
yeah,
they you would talk about explosive. Those guys are explosive. I mean,
I
it's in Marshall. Marshall showed his explosiveness, late in that game last night too. Normally he's more in between the tackles, just pounding the football, getting those tough yards. But he exploded for a 50+ yard touchdown last night too. So
for
I mean,
sure.
those two backs are fantastic, and it's going to be so interesting if we get to that Ohio State game, and it happens. Michigan does run the table to that point. How does Ohio State approach that? You can't imagine that they're going to just let the whole toughness angle be gone and just go try to win the game.
Yeah, I still think that talent. I think that was part of it last year, especially right. I think
Yeah,
that was part. I think the previous 3 years, Michigan was just better. Like Michigan finally caught up, and they were
yeah,
better. Um, Last year, going to that game, I think Ohio State was better. We don't know the spread, but it was a lot. And they had those guys out. But Ohio State was a little banged up, right? And combine that with Ohio State being like again flaky, overthink it, be tough, and they only scored 10 points, which is crazy. So health will be a big factor there, right? And again, waiting for that time to see Bryce Underwood. Hey, go in a track meet. How does he perform? And then maybe he performs better in that type of, who knows? Like maybe he's liking that. He
yeah.
winged it around a little bit in high school. He was fun to watch. But and then the other part, like, hey, 2 minute drive. Hey, we need you. We got to go make plays. So that'll be the key. That'll be the key whenever they get into that situation.
And you got to give Sherrill more credit. I know a lot of fans have been kind of frustrated with him these last 2 years, but he's 2-0 against Ohio State. He's
Mhm.
had his best coaching performances in those games. So I hope it happens. I hope Michigan can win these next three, and we get to that game, and
Well,
it's potentially winning it in for Michigan because it's going to feel like regardless. And we've talked about how the game doesn't mean as much as it used to, but if that's the scenario and it's a win and get in type scenario, it's going to feel big. It's going to feel real big, especially if Ohio State's number one and undefeated going in.
yep, no doubt. And um, Ohio State's quarterback Julian Sayin, and I know we're talking about Bryce Underwood, but he was highly recruited too, and he's a sophomore, so it's not like he has been in, and he's looked really good, but it's not like he's been in situations where he's had to go toe to toe with teams as well, right, and face a great
Yeah,
defense and make plays. So, yeah, they play. Let me see who they play Penn State this week. So before the season, you say, hey, this would be an awesome test for
yeah.
Ohio State, and this would be
It was
awesome,
a game you
obviously.
circled before the season,
Yeah,
not so much now.
not looking that way now, but yeah, he's fun to watch, and again, if you want to compare the two quarterbacks, he'll have to do that at some point too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of our outlook of both Michigan, Michigan State, and I want to get into a little bit from a national perspective and kind of what our takeaways were from Saturday, yesterday, and kind of what we saw. What are some things that stood out to you, Brian, from kind of the top 25 around college football yesterday?
I, it's crazy. I think you sent me that text, like the fact that two of the biggest winners yesterday are, and you could argue one is the best team in the country, Indiana and Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
And that's just mind-boggling to me. But they looked. I mean, Indiana looked awesome. They looked really good, and Vanderbilt with a huge win against Missouri. Those two are the ones that stood out to me the most. Texas A&M potentially ending the regime of Brian Kelly at
yeah,
LSU. That was pretty wild. Texas A&M might be finally putting it together um, after years of being really close. And then one that again, the one that probably stood out the most is Alabama after their loss to Florida State has looked really good. Has looked like the best team in the SEC. And so they've righted the ship and they're hot. And if they get into the playoff, they're going to be one of the favorites. I think I saw a couple people say that right now they're arguably the best team in the country, and I don't agree. But they overcame an early season loss to, which now doesn't look like a great loss because
Yeah.
Florida State I think is under 500 and struggling. But
Yeah.
it's college again. We've talked about this. It's college football. So, but they've looked really good, and the SEC again is the SEC.
Yeah, Ole Miss going to Oklahoma and winning that game, that was a huge win for
Mhm.
them. That was highly impressive, especially the way they ended up winning that game with some big defensive stops down the stretch. I thought that was a big one from yesterday as well. But you talked about LSU and Texas A&M. Man, oh man, for Texas A&M to go into LSU at night and just completely dominate them
Mhm.
and blow them out. And now we're seeing that this could be the end of Brian Kelly at LSU. And it's been kind of a tumultuous run for him. Some successes at times, but really just not what LSU has been looking for and what with the standards that they have there. And it was always kind of a weird fit from the beginning, with the fake Southern accent he was doing at their initial press conference or the pep rally or whatever when he was introduced, and or was it halftime of a basketball game, something along those lines, where he came out and gave that
Right.
speech in a Southern accent. It was just super weird, super
M-
awkward, super cringe,
My
and it's really
family.
never
Mm.
quite he's just never quite felt right there. Never quite felt like that was a good fit, at where he was at LSU. And that you were seeing, so this tweet came out, sources have told on 3 Sports that LSU position coaches have been sent home from the facility with Brian Kelly's future with the Tigers an unknown right now. So what do you think, man? What do you think, Brian? This is the end of Brian Kelly, and could he be an option for somebody like a Michigan State?
I think it's yeah, I think everything you said is true. I think whether he finishes out the season or not is to be seen, but I do think he's done at LSU. Um and I agree with you on everything. He didn't seem like a good fit, but the reason he went to LSU, I'm sure there was a financial part, but
Yeah,
LSU won't have the grade requirements and the academic requirements that Notre Dame had, right? And I'm sure I think he felt pretty limited about what their ceiling was at Notre Dame. And so, and again, LSU, like obviously think of all the coaches that have had success there: Les Miles, Nick Saban, Ed Orgeron, and like you go there just a recruiting hotbed, and it sounds like a perfect fit for whoever, but it's obviously not so far. And you could probably argue like he's had moments since he's been there already, and they probably felt like by now they should, right, they should have been playing for a national championship. Hasn't happened, and then again you lose the number one recruit in the country, like that happened.
yeah,
Was it his fault? I mean, again, Michigan gave him, $10 million or whoever, right? And so, but still, though, you kind of felt like, that's not good. Like that's almost the beginning of the end. I felt when that happened. It's like,
yeah.
that's hard to recover. And so I do think, with his local ties at, Grand Valley State and Central Michigan, that I'm sure if Michigan State moves on from Jonathan Smith, which we think they will, I think that's a natural conversation, no brainer that you're going to have at that point.
Michigan State as well as Penn State. I got to imagine Penn State's going to be thinking
Yeah.
about him too. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's going to satisfy the fan base at Penn State, but again, we talked about this too a couple episodes ago. Like, what will satisfy Penn State? You let James Franklin go. He's a great coach. He's did great things for Penn State. Like, I don't
So
know if they would look at Brian Kelly as an upgrade.
Well, not just that. I wonder if Brian Kelly wants to go from one pressure cooker to the other like that. Like to me, Michigan State seems perfect. Like you can only go up from there. Like he'd be almost like a savior, or at Penn State it'd be all right. You better win now, right?
Yeah,
And then that is a good point. Like I wonder sometimes if Penn State, like they had their last national championship, I think was in 1985. They of course went undefeated in 95, where they at least probably should have split the national championship with Nebraska, but it didn't happen. But program wise, like who does Penn State think they are? I guess to a degree, like they think they're, and I'm not discrediting them, but if you think you're the Alabama nationally, right, or the Ohio State nationally, then you should be able to get just about any coach you want, in theory. And that'll be interesting to see how that happens. If that happens, maybe again, maybe they're really going to go after Urban Meyer. Um, somebody like that. I don't know. I don't know. So that'll be interesting. Lane Kiffin, seems like a Southern guy. So if anything, like I've seen the Lane Kiffin rumors to
Florida,
Florida, right?
yes,
Yep,
Florida, yeah,
Florida, right? But why would he? But he's got it going on at Ole Miss. Like I don't know why.
yeah.
By the way, shout out to Trinidad Chambliss, Michigan high school quarterback and Ferris State University, who's been killing it at Ole Miss too. I got to make sure we get that in Michigan high school football. But yeah, I
He's
don't
got to be
know.
a Heisman candidate, I would think, at this
Oh,
point.
I think he has to be. He's
Yeah.
great. He's fun to watch. He's fun to watch. But Brian Kelly won't have his he'll have his share of offers. He'll have his share of conversations. He just will. I know like schematically he's really good and he's produced some good quarterbacks and great teams. Obviously undefeated seasons at Cincinnati and Notre Dame until the national championship game, the 1 year against Alabama. But he definitely is a guy who it looks like he's toned down his demeanor on the sideline, right? And I'm not going to name drop or anything like that, but I do have friends that worked for him at Central Michigan that just said, "Holy heck, man, he's a riot, and he gets after his staff." But I mean, the dude knows football, right? And he's been successful, and so I think there's so many programs that would, so many quarterbacks that would want to go play for him. Which, again, if I'm Michigan State, like I think we've said it before. I know growing up, I just felt like whenever it was a coaching change, I mean, granted they got Nick Saban, but at the time Nick Saban was an NFL coordinator. He wasn't necessarily um, the elite of the elite coaches, right? And again, he turned into Nick Saban really after he left Michigan State. But like Michigan State, Brian Kelly ties, like that's if you're a state fan, like that's pretty awesome. Like
That would be
you
huge.
are nationally recognized, you are on the radar right now. And I think that would be great for Michigan State.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to
Mhm,
see it.
mhm,
You know, come back. Obviously, we talked about the ties that he has to the state of Michigan. I would think that brings so much, like you said, national relevance to Michigan State, and it brings
mhm,
so much more juice to the rivalry of Michigan State and Michigan.
mhm.
And man, I'd love to see it. I'd absolutely love to see it. But you talked about how Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame because the academic standards and things like that at LSU might make it a little easier to compete for a national championship. Well, Freeman's having no struggles.
I'm
He
with you.
took
No,
Notre
I'm
Dame to
with
the
you.
national
No, I told
championship
you.
game last
I'm
year.
with you. Yep, I'm with you. And that's it's funny though, like, one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? Like Marcus Freeman, he was a coordinator on that staff, and then like he stuck around after Brian Kelly left, and like to him, man, that's like dream job. Where Brian Kelly, it's obvious, it wasn't. And so you're right though, he's doing just fine.
Yeah, and I
Hmm.
don't think Notre Dame fans are wishing to have Brian Kelly
Not
back
at
at all.
all.
I think they're
Mm-mm.
pretty darn happy with how things turned out there
Mm-mm.
for the Fighting Irish. So
Was
going to
there
be very
anything?
interesting. Yeah,
It will be.
but
Was there anything that like shocked you? Like we're starting to see, the questions and the conversation is about the playoffs, right? And who's going to get in and who's not going to get in or who's on the bubble. Um, is there anything that stood out to you? Is there anybody you're like, oh, okay, they should be a playoff team or they'll be fun to watch? Is there
well, I
anything
guess
that
I mean
stood?
you kind of brought it up. I texted to you, but we're living in a world where we could potentially see Indiana and Vanderbilt be the Big Ten and SEC champions.
Yeah.
Like the consistency of both teams' play is it's wild. It's wild to see. And what do you attribute this to? Like seeing Indiana and Vanderbilt where they're at, but also just kind of seeing the parity across college football. Like there really isn't any.
No.
I would feel dominant teams. I mean, Ohio State has been the most consistent, but I still don't see them on. When you watch them, I'm not like blown away by them. Like I think they're just going to completely run the table or anything. Like I definitely think they can be beaten. Like there
Uh,
isn't any team or multiple teams that I feel like, yeah, these are the absolute top contenders, no question about it.
mhm.
Like there's a lot of teams. You could go down the list into the 10, 15 range, maybe even into the 20s and be like, yeah, if this team gets in, they could make a run.
Mhm.
they could make a run.
Well, it's as much as we rail about the playoff, right, and we miss the importance of the regular season. I think you could argue that the playoff is necessary during this era of college football with the parity because we don't have those couple teams that you're like, man, they're the best, they're dominating. We want to see them in the national championship game or even the Final Four, right? So I think obviously when you have your transfer portal and your name, image, and likeness, it's changed everything. It's obviously changed everything and leveled that playing field. And it to that degree, yes, it's made things a lot more interesting, right? Like there are more teams in that playoff conversation. Legitimately, still though, I do still think that your top end schools and teams, they're still going to be like you're not going to see a Cinderella. And football is just different than basketball, and we've talked about that. Like we're not going to see your Cinderella. So you'll still see your two or three teams that I think are the favorites going in that'll end up winning it. And yeah,
I
simply
don't
to me.
know. I don't know about that,
All
Brian.
right,
Like
let's
I'm
go.
not saying a Cinderella, but like a team that gets in is like a 12th or a 13th seed that is from like the Big Ten or
So I
SEC.
mean, I guess you could say if you want to. I guess with that logic, you could say Ohio State last year finishing fourth in the Big Ten,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Was
exactly.
kind of
Yeah, exactly.
something like that. Yeah. That's. I mean, I think that's fair. If Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I don't think it's gonna be like the Cinderella. Like you're not gonna get Boise State gonna just go on a run. You're not gonna get Tulane or somebody like that going on a run.
No, 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 I'm not talking a team like that, and not out of the group of 5, but I'm just
Hmm.
thinking like I'm just looking at like a Tennessee right here. I'm looking at they're
Yeah,
17th, they're 6-2
yeah,
right now. There's a ton of like 2-loss teams
yeah,
in the SEC that you could see like, okay, if they get in, like
yeah,
even like a Texas, like if they
yeah,
can get their stuff together, get hot,
yeah.
get down the stretch and
That
sneak
does.
in. Like there's
I'll
so many
say.
they were the number 1 team in the country
Yep,
going
I'll
in.
say I remember like yeah, there were years where a team struggled early on and then got hot for the rest of the season and everybody said, "Oh, if we had a playoff, they could have been, they would have been one you wouldn't want to play." I mean, that's definitely there's some truth to that. To that degree, I agree. Again, yeah, like Ohio State last year like you're saying. Maybe they're not healthy now, right? Or they weren't healthy at the beginning of the year and they're healthy
Yeah.
at the end of the year. So, yeah, I agree. That adds some intrigue to it for sure.
And this is definitely the time now. We're gonna enter November. This is where you're gonna see the pretenders separated from the contenders. Going forward here, and it's gonna be fascinating. It always is around this time, but I do think the parity is added a little something. It creates more meaningful games, and we've had this argument of would you rather have the tippy top games be your best games, your top games, that everything is on the line games, or would you rather have more meaningful games
Right.
because you have all these teams that are 2-loss teams, right? Normally they'd be done. Like we wouldn't even really be talking about them. Like
Yeah.
Michigan, like they would be done. We wouldn't even be talking about them potentially making a playoff. And now we are. And these games are meaningful down the stretch for them. A team like Texas, another example, like a 2-loss team, like if they can find a way to get hot and run the table, they're in, and if they get in, who knows what can happen. So it's created a lot of meaningful games at the back end of like the rankings at 10 through the 25. Like those teams are still in it now in early as we enter early November.
With that, 2 points I want to add to that though. So what's going to happen when Ohio State and Indiana are both undefeated and playing a meaningless Big Ten title game? I mean, I
Yeah, that
say
part
I
sucks.
I say meaningless. It'll mean something to hang a banner for. I mean, probably more for Indiana than Ohio State, right? Don't kid yourself. But ultimately, like does that matter? Not in the grand scheme of things, not in the long run, right? And then we will face the inevitable. Somebody is going to be 13th or 14th, and they're going to say, "Oh, they should have gotten in. They should have gotten in." And kind of
Got
like
to move it to
Alabama last year.
16. Got
Yeah,
to move it to
right. Like, and
20.
that
Got to
and
move it to
that's where it's
24. And
like,
you keep going.
yeah, that's where it's like, all right, like that needs to be done. So I think you said it years ago. At some point, we're gonna have it like the NFL, and we're gonna just have the two sides, or four super leagues, whatever you want to call it, and then
Not even
there's
4. I think it's
there's
going to
your
be 2. I think it's going to be Big
two,
10
and
and the
then
SEC. I think
yeah,
that's where we're
if you want
headed.
to have, and then if you want to have 16 teams, 8 and 8, however you do it. I don't know.
When the ACC breaks up, which I think
Yeah,
is inevitable, and the
yeah,
Florida States and the Miamis and those teams leave, And they're kind of locked into this weird contract. There's been a lot of lawsuits and things going on. Florida State was trying to sue to get out of the contract and that. So there's still a lot to be done about that. But you got to feel at some point these teams are going to leave the ACC and either go to the Big Ten or the SEC, and that'll be the point. That'll be the point where it's over, and we're looking at two big conferences, and you're looking at basically an NFL situation where you got the AFC, NFC, it's going to be Big Ten, SEC, and that sucks. Obviously, that's going to suck because then it really is. It's really that would be the true end of traditional college football. We're already pretty much there, but you still have a little bit of the tradition that we're kind of just hanging on to by a fingernail here. But I think we're not too far away from all that being over with. Which is sad.
It is one of the cool things I heard that people didn't like and disagreed with would you have your non-Power 5 schools playing their own separate little playoff, right, or own separate championship, because the thinking is no, we want the little guys need a place at the table. But again, like Boise State upsetting Oklahoma one year, it happened, yes, but again, it's very difficult. I'd be willing to wager a lot of money that a non-Power 5 is going to go on a deep run in a playoff, right? And if you expand the playoff to get more teams, you're going to get more SEC and Big Ten teams. Like, you're just not gonna do that run. So give them their own kind of like NIT type thing and like crown a champion. That'd be really cool for those guys, because ultimately the another challenge for those non-Power 5 schools is they're trying to avoid becoming a recruiting, fertile recruiting area for the Power 5, and that's happening right too. It's happening all over college football. So, it's a crazy, interesting dynamic where we are, but we're getting off on a little tangent here, but just wild.
But we'll finish this topic up with this, Brian. But who, obviously we think Ohio State's kind of, the top team has been the most consistent, but outside of Ohio State, name a couple teams or even just one team that kind of stands out to you. They think, man, if I had to put some money down on a team to win it all, who would that team be? Or you can even add a couple teams into it.
I'm extremely impressed with Indiana. I'm extremely impressed.
It's hard to wrap your head around it, though, isn't it?
It is, but they've blown out a few teams, right? And have been impressive in that. And that's really stood out to me. That's been awesome. Indiana, like I said, I've been impressed with Texas A&M. Like, they're a quiet 8-0 right now, I think. Like I said earlier, I heard more about Alabama, right? And I heard all about them getting hot and looking good since their loss, but nobody's talking about Texas A&M. Maybe now they will after what they did to LSU the other day. But I would say, if just thinking off the top of my head, Indiana and Texas A&M have been the most impressive to me. How about you?
Yeah, I think Texas A&M for sure. Going into Notre Dame and making that comeback win the way they did, and that absolute shootout. I mean, that was I think they're two of the top teams in the country. Notre Dame had two incredibly tough losses, going to Miami and then the home loss to Texas A&M. That was an absolute classic between those two, and I could see them facing off again down the road, Notre Dame and Texas A&M. And I would love to see it, man. I wouldn't mind seeing that on a neutral field. Those two teams go at it again. But definitely Texas A&M, I think, has been, to me, the most impressive. But you can't count on Indiana. And again, it's just tough for me to wrap my mind around the fact that it's Indiana, because you're just not used to it. And I remember hearing Nick Saban, I think it was last week, Pat McAfee was kind of nudging him a little bit, like, he never picked Vanderbilt to win. He's like, he just flat out said it. I just can't wrap my mind around the fact that Vanderbilt is a strong program. He's like, that was the one team, and I was surprised he actually went as far to say this, but he just flat out said it. Like, that's the one team that we knew we could always beat in the SEC. That was the one team, one game that we could circle and be like, yep, that's a win. Like, it's just not that way anymore with these two teams, and then they're right up there. But especially Indiana, and he's mentioned it, Ryan. But that win going to Oregon and winning by 2 scores, Might
That,
be the most impressive win
for
of the year for
sure.
any team.
Well, and they beat a good Illinois team, I think like 63-10 as well. I mean, it's not like Indiana.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've just looked dominant. They've looked like that you could argue they've looked better in some ways than Ohio State. You could argue that, right? The funny thing is, like I remember growing up, again, Indiana not great, but their basketball, like when you think of Indiana, you think of basketball.
yeah,
And if Indiana wins a college football national championship, before Indiana basketball does.
yeah.
Like the
That's
last one was
wild.
87, right? With Keith Smart and Steve Elford.
Yeah,
Like, wow, just crazy. Kind of
yeah, that's
cool, but
incredible.
just
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, just crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, going to be an interesting, as we enter November, I said, you separate the pretenders from the contenders. Going to be fascinating. Going to be fascinating down the stretch. So, we're going to wrap up with this final topic. Going a little different here, but obviously the biggest story in sports this week was the gambling scandal, and it kind of hit home with Chauncey Billups and him getting arrested for a gambling scandal, being involved in these illegal poker games. I mean, Brian, when you saw this story come out with Chauncey Billups and everything that happened there, like, what was your initial thoughts with this? Like, because there's your mind goes in so many different ways with this, and what went down and what could have went down. But man, we're headed down a scary road in sports when these things start popping up more and more.
Yeah, obviously my first thought was like, what a bummer for Detroit sports fans because Chauncey Big Shot Billups in the 2004 Pistons was beloved in this town, and you're like, dude, like, do you really need money that bad? Like that you're gonna do something like this over a poker game, right? Just wild and mind-boggling. And I'd love to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. We can get into the debate about, gambling and being legal and whatnot. But it's here, it's there, and it's in pro sports, and you see it all the time. You watch an NBA game, you watch any sporting event, and what do you know? There's an ad for FanDuel or,
Yeah,
DraftKings. It doesn't matter, right? And it's there. And those guys they're human too. And I know, I kind of think this is not the end of it. Like I think I saw like with the Tim Donaghy stuff that came out, the official who got in trouble, you remember with Rasheed Wallace and
hmm
throwing games and stuff like that. Like, and not just basketball, but man, like I'm certain like there's going to be more that comes out, and it's not. I mean, it's an unfortunate part of the game where when you add the gambling aspect to it, the gambling element. Then again, the gambling element to a degree, betting on sports has always been there. Um, but God, this is just mind-boggling. Like, dude, how do you have the time? That gets me too. It's like you're an
that's why.
NBA
Yeah,
coach. Like
exactly.
I'm surprised. Like, is this like your hobby? Like, what is up? So just wild, wild.
Well, the Terry Rozier stuff too was wild. And the big problem is with these prop bets,
Yeah.
with the individual players, because
Yes.
his was a situation where he just kind of took himself out of the game. I think
Yeah.
like 10 minutes into the game. So obviously, all the bets, for his point total, hit. But he was telling, family members. He was obviously telling, um, members of, I guess, the mafia and this and that. And but that's where it's really it makes it tough because it's so easy for these players to manipulate that.
No
Like
doubt it is.
especially for the lower end players
No
that are maybe
doubt.
like, hey, your over under is 10. Well, you can easily just, hey, I'm at 8 points. I'm going to make sure I don't. Here in the fourth quarter, I'm just going to make sure I don't make another bucket the rest of
N-
the game, or just say, hey, coach, my ankle's really, really acting up on me. I don't want to hurt the team. I should probably just, sit the rest of this game. Like
No
it can
doubt.
go so easily under the radar, little things like that. But man, it's scary where this
And
could
I
go, because you start putting into question the integrity of the outcomes of these games. And man,
yeah.
we're down a road that I don't know if there's any turning back. I don't know how you correct this.
Yeah, we're ignorant. We'd be ignorant to think that it doesn't happen all the time. Like I think it
Yeah,
does. I'm pretty sure it does. And like you said, It is a scary part. Scary thought for pro sports or sports in general that this is going on, and what you're watching is scripted, or it's like WWF wrestling, and
Yeah. Well,
that's the
like
thing.
we talked about with the Lions Kansas City game, right? And we weren't
Yeah,
talking about the gambling aspect, and the aspect of the gambling did come up, with the Jared Goff touchdown, but just in
yeah,
general, like with the them getting zero penalties, and it's like, man, everybody's kind of questioning it already, and then you get these stories popping up. Once the integrity of the outcomes of games are in question, it is pro wrestling. And I've
yep,
said it. I've said it. Like, if it gets to a point where it gets this bad, I'll just go watch pro wrestling then, because at
yep.
least I already know it's scripted. At least I know it's predetermined.
The
I know that going in.
the
Like, but if
crazy
sports starts turning into that, like, what are we doing?
the crazy part for me with my personal bias against the NBA is I've kind of felt like that anyway. Like LeBron will get certain calls that other guys don't. You know what I'm saying? And I just
Well, you earned
right
that
and
call, Ryan. You earned it.
see, I'm not a fan, but that happens at other sports, and I don't like that. Like
I agree. I hate
certain
it.
pitchers,
A
right?
call's a call.
Veteran pitchers will get that corner, get that outside
Mhm.
corner where rookies are like, what are we talking about? Like that's stupid, And yep, it's openly going to be a problem. And by the way, Dan, we have some breaking news. I just read a tweet from Adam Schefter of all people that Brian Kelly was informed earlier today that he's going to be dismissed, and the
Wow.
team knows, and they're just trying to figure out how they're going to progress going forward and how they're going to make the
So
exit happen. So,
LSU, and Penn State
yep,
are open
yep,
positions,
yep,
and James Franklin and Brian Kelly are
and
on the
and
open market for
Flor-
coaches.
Florida State, like three teams that are nationally recognized
Florida,
caliber.
not Florida State, Florida.
Excuse me, Florida. Excuse me,
Yeah,
Florida. Yep.
yeah, Florida as well.
And
Yeah.
now I just lost a tweet, so let me find it. But you might beat it before me, but yeah. What do we? Yep. So yeah, get on it, Michigan State. Get on it.
Yeah, yeah,
Get on it.
absolutely.
Let me see. Yeah. So just yep, crazy time. Yep, here we go. Per ESPN's Pete Thamel, LSU coach Brian Kelly was informed of the intention to dismiss him earlier today. The school is
Wow.
expected to inform the team of this development tonight. Talks about the terms of his departure are expected to continue. Just crazy. Just crazy.
Well,
Yep.
there it is. Yeah,
There it
I mean,
is.
Michigan
Yeah.
State should be on it.
Different.
They're
I
making the
think that
backdoor calls
like
right now.
and I don't think they won't be. Like I
They
think they
should
will
be.
be.
They
They
absolutely
should.
should be.
Yeah, absolutely should be. You wonder if Brian Kelly wants to come back to this area. But like I said, a lot less pressure. I think it just makes
I mean,
sense.
where else is he going to go?
I mean,
Does
like
he
we said,
stop
yeah,
coaching? Does
we
he end
like we
coaching?
said,
Does he
no,
go
I
into
don't know.
broadcasting?
It
I
could
don't
be
think
like
that.
it could be like a lot of guys. They take a year or two away and figure things
Maybe.
out and wait for that right
He's not
job.
getting any
But
younger though either.
no, there's that. Yeah, man, a lot of layers to it. I think Michigan State would be natural if it comes to that.
I think it'd be
I think
great. I really do.
you're a quarterback recruit. Like in Michigan State hires Brian Kelly. He's immediately in the top five. You just right, like especially in the Midwest, you're immediately thinking, "Oh, okay, that dude's helped me get to the NFL."
Well, and then also you got to think of assistant coaches. He's going to bring a great
Hmm.
staff with him,
Yep,
and it just
yep,
yeah, and it changes the entire vibe of everything going around Michigan State immediately.
yep,
Immediately, things
yep,
change.
yep.
The whole just an incredible amount of excitement would be infused in the
Yeah,
football program overnight if
no doubt.
they were able to make
Yeah,
that happen. So
yeah, no
I
doubt.
think we're both on board with that. Let's make it happen, Michigan State.
Yeah.
Let's go after it. And I mentioned earlier, let's fast conference we did. I talked about like, maybe they should go a little bit, like because they're going to be playing three coaches, and to get Brian Kelly, it's not going to be cheap. But
Right.
man, it just seems like an opportunity for them that they got to at least explore and
Yeah,
see if they can get the money together to make it happen. I got to imagine the alumni would be like, yeah, let's do it, man.
for sure.
I'll do
Yeah.
whatever it costs.
It's
Let's get a top tier coach in here.
in college football right now, it is kind of the survival of the fittest. Like if you're not putting up, like I don't think money should be an option. I don't think money will be an option at Michigan State. You got to put up.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, we can wrap that. It kind of took away from our gambling and sports topic, but I think that's the biggest news of the night by far is Brian Kelly being let go. And yeah, I think we're both on board, man. Michigan State needs to make this happen and at least make the effort. At least make the effort to go and try and get him because I don't know where Michigan State goes maybe like like I said, maybe they go after like more of an assistant, but oh man, I guess just after watching last night, like it just, man, I feel like it's still Michigan State can still be a top 20 program if they can get a top tier coach. And
I think they are.
Man, they need something.
I think
some infusement of excitement.
I think the game has changed, unfortunately, in this regard, right? Player development, while still important, isn't what it was like when Mark D'Antonio was at Michigan State. All right. When I talked about that before, how they develop 2, 3, and 4 stars and become an NFL guys. So that being said, like if you get somebody who's like that splash, like that big hire, like you said, infuse some energy into the program, man, now it's different, right? Now it's different. Now you have guys that were considering LSU to go play quarterback or go play receiver there. Now that are they thinking, oh, okay, East Lansing, all right, play for that guy. So yeah, that's the dynamic that I agree with that you're talking about. Like make that splash hire.
Yeah, pretty fascinating. I mean, we talked about, college football as a whole right now. It's a lot of parity, a lot of, meaningful games going on right now. But man, this coaching carousel is going to be maybe just as fascinating with where these guys end up and what these schools are going to do. You talked about Florida. You got Florida, Penn State, LSU. Man, those are 3 of the top most, I'd put them, in the top 15 of most alluring programs to go coach at. And they're all open right now in the middle of the season. Not even at the end of the season. In the middle of the season, all 3 of those spots are open.
So it's funny, by the way. Before I know we're getting close to the end of the show. I just clicked on ESPN.com, and Brian Kelly out at LSU, top candidates, transfers, and recruits. And you know who you have a picture of? 5 candidates for the job, and the picture is Marcus Freeman.
Oh, what are they? There is no chance he is leaving. Notre Dame will do whatever it takes to keep him because he is such a perfect fit there, man. Perfect. He could be there for 20 years.
He could be
an absolute idol there.
I think he just comes off like a great guy. The players love him. He's dynamic, right? He doesn't say anything or do anything to embarrass the university. Like, yeah, I'm with you. But it was just funny.
We bring back all the traditions and everything.
Of course. Of course. Yeah, it's just funny. We were having that conversation about him, and then what do you know? Hey, possible replacement.
To do exactly what Brian Kelly did.
I don't like ESPN for a lot of reasons, but like, come on, this shouldn't even be. Come on, is just this clickbait right now? Did they just get me? Come on,
is LSU a better job than Notre Dame? Like, what world is that? Like, it's Notre Dame.
I don't think so, right?
They just went to the national championship,
right?
Like, come on.
I know. Yeah, he's not going anywhere. That's clickbait. Just cool. Crazy,
hilarious though.
It's crazy. On that note,
it brings the whole topic full circle.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good way to end the show, Brian. So you got any final thoughts as we close off here?
No, it's going to be exciting. It's exciting last month of the college football season, and we're looking forward to it. And we just wonder if there's going to be any more crazy news and who's being let go. Right?
Well, we know there's probably going to be a couple more firings.
I'm sure there will be.
I mean, I thought Wisconsin and Michigan State would be done by now.
So. Yeah, we did. We did think that. But again, the weekend's not over, so maybe tomorrow. Yeah. We'll see.
At worst, I mean, probably the end of the year, those 2 spots.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's going to be wild.
That's going to be a fun show, talking about all the coaching openings that we can talk about and the replacements, and that'll be a good one.
Going to be interesting. All right. Yeah. So another interesting show for us, wrapping up with a lot of college football talk. But yeah, they'll do it for us this week. So for Coach Barnes, I'm Dan Murphy, and we'll see you again next week.